All right, welcome to the On the Top Coaching Podcast, where we discuss the new and meaningful, powerful waves in the sport of swimming. I'm your host, Jason Polano, and I'm here today with Dr. Kirk Grand, former NFHS High School Sectional Coach of the Year and former assistant sprint coach at Auburn University and at IU. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast today, Kirk.
Hey, thanks for having me. It's always a pleasure to talk swimming, and especially with a gamified mind like yourself.
I'm working on it. We're going to see in the next couple of weeks how that turns out. But so first question that I ask everybody is, what is your history in the sport as a swimmer, as a coach? And I mean, even now you've kind of taken the backwards approach on coaching, where it's all about studying and learning for you. So can you just tell us a little bit about, Kirk's story?
Yeah, so I have a rich family history in swimming. My mom swam from probably 4 to 25, and because of that, she tried to keep me out of it for as long as she could. But I started swimming summer league at just a small pool in the little town that I'm from in Trenton, Ohio, and just kind of fell in love with the sport from there. And but it took me a while to fully commit. It took me till about my junior year to fully commit to club swimming. I did everything under the sun, played soccer, wrestled, basketball, all that good stuff, which now all the research suggests like, oh, that's what you're supposed to do. But it was just kind of like what you did. So started there, and then swam like full time my senior year of high school. I was not very good, but I was good for the team that I was on. And I trained at Miami of Ohio. And so then I would always watch the men's team there kind of come in and train, and I was always just in awe. And so as a lazy senior, I only applied to one college, and that was Miami of Ohio. It was like 20 minutes away. I was the firstborn, so I also had a lot of separation anxiety guilt from my mom. So that was kind of interesting. So I went to Miami of Ohio, was not going to swim, but I was randomly paired with a roommate that was like, hey, he was recruited and he had a small scholarship to swim. And he was like, I saw that you swim. Are you going to be on the team? I'm like, well, I hadn't planned on it. And he's like, well, you might as well just come to practice and talk to coach and see if you can try out. And I was like, well, all right. So I went from 0 to 100. My first year, I tried out, and you had to do all these test sets to basically get the combination for the varsity locker room. Within the varsity locker room was within, it's kind of like all pools are today, like at least the athletic pools. It's within the main locker room, but you have to get the code to go into the varsity room. And so one of those sets was 400 IMs long course. And again, I was not going to swim. And I recently had decided, okay, well, I'll try out. And so I was not in any kind of shape to do that. And so I barely missed the team, like making the team. But luckily, Pete Lindsay, who I learned a lot from, and basically it was kind of cool to be able to work with him for that year. He offered me like a manager position where you can swim in the morning, stay in shape, and be a manager at night and help the team and travel and basically be a student coach, which was amazing. Learned a tremendous amount. But then that summer between my freshman and sophomore year, I was like, no, I'm not. I'm making the team next year. I'm doing it. And so I just busted my butt and did the 6,400 IMs and did 2,100s kick on, I forget what the interval was, but it was all long courses. So as a sprinter and as a young swimmer who had never used paddles or a snorkel or done any sort of training to go from that to 20 hours a week, and I was pretty broken down.
I can imagine.
So I learned a lot of being on the fringe. You kind of learn, when you're not the top guy, and you got to fight for everything. And so it was kind of a cool experience. Looking back, it's cooler now than it was then, I think. but I was just so grateful. So I made the team, got the combination, and was able to be, Division 1 athlete on a really cool team, and we had an amazing facility, um, and so it was really impactful. That end of that season, I kind of was like, well, I feel too close to home. I swam club here, and so I kind of wanted to, spread my wings and see something different. So I went to I transferred to Ohio State. Didn't swim, lost some credits in the transfer, um, and kind of the story of my life. I changed my major like 6 times. I think I needed like 150 credits to graduate. I had like 194 just because I had just a diverse like from human biology to human nutrition to I took a art is liter or war is literature course where you're reading all about like the wars in the Middle East and like, but it was so cool because I didn't know it then, but I was kind of being forced to learn about anything and everything, and so that was really really neat for me. Um, and then from there, I was away from swimming for a little while. I got into sprint car racing with my uncle who lives in Bloomington, or used to live in Bloomington, Indiana. At the time, he still did. And we just traveled the country working on sprint cars and learned a lot about elite performance, learned a lot about that lifestyle and what that was all about. And finally, he sat me down and was like, you can't do this the rest of your life, right? It's not sustainable. And I was like, this is the talk, isn't it? And so he introduced me to Dr. Joel Steger at IU in the Counseling Center for the Science of Swimming. And if you don't know Joel, he's a classic coach, but he's also a scientist. And I say classic coach in the terms of he's very charismatic, and he can get you to do things that you don't really know you want to do yet, or. And
he's
so I sat down.
He's the master of inception, is what I'm hearing.
For sure, 100%. And I have a funny story about him. But he sat me down. He's like, "How do you feel about a master's in XPhys?" And before I could answer, I was in his exercise cardiopulmonary physiology class a week later, and taking out some loans to go to grad school. But so that was an amazing experience. Got back into swimming randomly with that one. Obviously, being at the center, I was involved, but I shared an office with Dr. Steger and went from just learning the physiology of swimming, learning about power and all that stuff, to coaching the high school team. The head coach of Bloomington South walked in and he was like, "Hey doc, do you have anybody that can be a JV assistant coach?" And he's like, he looks over, he's like, "Yeah, right here." And so again, didn't know I was going to get into that, but of course, I said yes. And so I started there, and that guy, Kyle Ruth, who actually owns a successful CrossFit gym in Charlotte, and he is involved in like training think tank and has like a kind of a coaching, like a consulting gig down there, and he's done a really great job. So he decided to leave a year after I was in, and so he's like, again, it was like, "You want to be the head coach?" Sure. And so
and I also
really
want to say
lucky.
this: Bloomington South is no joke. Like, I mean, Kirk and I met at IU swim camp. For people that don't know, like a large number of the IU swimmers come from Bloomington South. Like a shocking number of those IU swimmers are from Bloomington South. And when people were talking about Bloomington South this, Bloomington South that, I was I coach a slightly above average high school team in the state of Texas, so I was thinking, oh, okay. And then I looked up some of Bloomington South stuff, and I'm like, good night. Okay, so Kirk wound up just falling into good graces with that program and took it a lot of places as well.
I was very lucky. I've walked into a loaded deck basically, and it was just kind of like I walked in and it's like, man, can I do this? And so on top of that, I was um, working with the Councilman Center swim team, and I was the head senior coach there, which is super nice because you can train as a club coach in August, and then you just carry over your high school kids throughout the whole season, which is a humongous benefit. And so I tried to reach out. I never done anything like that before. I kind of fell into the seat, so I reached out to a lot of uh, coaches and tried to pick their brains, and ultimately distilled down the most I heard is just don't mess them up. I had really good athletes that made me look really good, and it was you had to push them, but they just took the reins and they knew what they wanted to do, and so it was like, well, okay, they know what they want to do. I'm going to get out of their way, and so that year we got second to Carmel by like 1.5 points at state. We had a tremendous season, but it's all to the kids that I was around, and again, like that's kind of been the story of my coaching career. Like a lot of the kids that I've had the privilege of coaching, I've learned way more from them, and if it's a collaboration and learning, it's way more fun that way. And so that's kind of what I learned there, and went from. I think we got second my first year, and we got less than second. I don't remember which place we got my second year, but it was. I think I actually did a better job of coaching my second year, uh, and I was more proud of what we did that year than I was. I mean, I'm obviously proud of where we finished and all that stuff. However, I think we didn't have as loaded of a deck, but we still did a really good job, and so I was happy with that, and that's more of a memorable year for me. Um, and so from there, I had a kid. Um, his name was Brendan Michelson, and he's going to be famous one day, if not already. He is an engineer. He was going to Purdue, and so was learning about physiology, learning about the minutia of how the lungs work, how lactate affects the blood, and um, generating swim power, and all that awesome stuff. But Brendan's story, he was really really good on a relay. We called him he was a 17-year-old kid that could grow a beard of a 40-year-old man. And so we called him Lumberjack Lezak because he'd always be the anchor, and no matter where we were, if he was getting in the water and we had a chance, he was going to get his hand on the wall, and he would split ridiculous. Like he individually, he 47 at best, maybe. On a relay, he'd be like 45, and that's no relay advantage. Like that's what's
Yeah.
going on there. And so that was really, and it's not the only person or the only swimmer that kind of influenced me to learn more about the brain. But he was that I mean, I just couldn't believe that, and it was from the individual 100 to the relay. How'd you drop 2 seconds?
Yeah.
And so that really motivated me to learn more. I wanted to learn more about what changes in the brain to allow the physiology, I guess, to unlock the physiology to attain that. How does that happen? And so I just started emailing around. I didn't really know what I wanted to study yet. I looked at a lot of different colleges, but basically I went down the list and at NCAA's and looked at the top 10 teams, and I was like, I got to find a program at one of these schools
That's a
because I
good
wanted to
place
be
to start.
involved. I wanted to be involved in swimming, and I wanted to learn more about the brain. And so, luckily, my advisor at Auburn, Dr. Matt Miller, I emailed him, and he was a former cross country track coach. And so he was like, "Oh, I know exactly what you're talking about. I was a former coach," and so we just kind of hit it off. And he's done a bunch of different studies on cognitive workload, attention, teamwork, uh, and he's got a diverse kind of background in obviously athletics coaching. And he's worked some with the military, so it was just like a perfect fit. And it was just like a random email again. So it's similar story to to my journey. We just connected, and so I was like, well, looks like I'm moving to Auburn, Alabama. And I really didn't know much about Auburn. Moved down there, fell in love with the place. It is the quintessential Southern charm town, and got to work on my studies. Was a volunteer assistant with Brett for 3 years while I was working on my studies. And then I was fortunate enough, as soon as I graduated, I think it was maybe John Hargis left. And so there was a position. And so it was like, uh, what do I got to do to get this one? And so I sat down with Brett and I was able to work side by side with Brett, learned a lot from Brett, um, just about, again, about sprinting, but about sprinters mentality.
Which we all know
And
that sprinters are their own. They are their own species. So
yeah, they make you better as a coach. You just don't know it yet. But it was pretty cool to do that and learn from him. But prior, when I was a volunteer, it was like right after the 2012 Olympics, I think. And so the pro group was amazing. Like we had a tremendous pro group there, from like Marcello Sciarghini, Adam Brown. Let's see, we had, oh man, I can't think of her name. Laura Jackson was there, and so you're around a lot of these studs. They were complete studs, and I learned. And so as a volunteer, and the college coaches have to coach the college team, so a large part of my job was to coach the pros, and I was like, okay. So it was awesome. And so, but again, I learned so much from those professional athletes, that I think looking back, like it just influenced me, to see them chasing their dreams, and also giving them a little bit of freedom to pursue what they were doing in a way that they wanted to do it, but also kind of reeling them in, and watching Brett and the coaches, how they work with them, was really neat. And then so that was the first 3 years, and then once I became a full time assistant, it was more direct work with the sprint crew. Um, and but I got to work with guys like Bruno Fratus, Zach Apple, Kyle Darmody, and it was again like just an eye opening experience, and just got my PhD. But I had just started getting my PhD in the application. How do I apply everything that's in my brain? Uh, and so that was really cool, and just bouncing things off of Brett, bouncing things off the kids. Um, so yeah, and so then, um, the year that Brett decided to step down, was kind of a bummer, because we didn't really want to leave. We didn't really want to leave Auburn, but luckily there was an opportunity in Bloomington, and it was like a continuing education for me. It was like taking it to the next level. IU was a high functioning program, and I know that you know that because you've worked camp there a couple times. But it's a well-oiled machine. Like,
there are
and
so many moving pieces. And for you to have, a familiarity with Bloomington and IU and kind of how that all works, I mean, it just sounds like, it seems like there was a lot of, swim vine intervention with your career, Kirk. Like things just kind of fall into place.
yeah, for sure. And so it was an opportunity to kind of learn how to take a collegiate program to the next level. And obviously, when you're vying for national titles and you're setting American records, and that was all going on, and it was like, okay, so something's clicking here. And so it's kind of cool to see the ingredients of everything that was going on at IU. Learned a ton about teamwork. The team at IU was the most impactful part for me. The way they took care of each other, the way they supported each other, and the way they worked their butts off. Like, and they were all about it, and they knew how to do what was best for them, and that led to their success, in my opinion. Like each individual team member took some ownership, or really was kind of pressed to take some ownership, because if they didn't, they wouldn't have been able to do it.
Yep.
And so you really try to figure out who you are and what you're about. And I think a lot of them are really good at figuring out who you are and what you're about. And if it doesn't jive, then either figure it out, or you know, go to a greener pasture wherever that may be for you.
And
But
I want to say this too. The Swim Swam comment section seems to have a vendetta against the IU program because there's a lot of movement. But like you said, the people that stick around that IU program love it.
for sure,
Brock Brown is about to be a senior now. He hasn't swam at a single conference meet, but like he is all about that IU program. He goes through 2-3 of those breaststroke practices a week, and it's not because he has Olympic aspirations. It's because he loves the people and he loves what he does and he loves everything about it. So for all you
Brock
swim
has a
spammers,
special. Go ahead. Sorry.
swim spammers out there, you might want to rethink your critical nature of the IU program.
And just get to know the kids first, like maybe just spend a little time actually getting to know the kids instead of spending that time putting something on a website anonymously.
Absolutely.
uh
So
and,
we
and
we talked a little bit, Kirk, off of our recording, but just kind of you spoke a lot about autonomy, and that's the kind of the area that you studied that you were most interested in, and how it impacts physiology and performance. Can you give us a little bit of information about that?
yeah, for sure. And it kind of comes back to, how do you figure out who you are and what you're about? And so as a coach, it's important to encourage kids to ask themselves questions um, about, I mean, I wouldn't say what their purpose is. I think that's pretty broad. However, I think when you tell them what to do and what to think, you're never going to achieve uh, or reach the potential that's there um, when you can guide them they're on their own path with um, kind of autonomy based learning and autonomy based encouragement, really. And that comes in many different forms. IU has their way, Texas has their way. Every school has their own philosophy on those types of things. Um, but I think it's important to ask more questions than you give statements to kids. I think today we're bombarded with information, um, and it's really hard to decipher what we want. And so, what I studied was essentially uh, autonomy based learning, and we looked at my dissertation was like incidental choice. And so, uh, to distill that down, it's basically like you go to putt putt and you choose your ball color. How does that affect either performance, and how does that affect learning, right? Um, and so, a lot of research suggests that when you give learners choices, even incidental choices, they learn the task to a greater extent and they remember it in a transfer test. So basically, what I'm saying is when you give an athlete a choice, they perform better and they learn faster. If that's not enough motivation to kind of ask good questions and lead them on the path to good choices, I don't know what is. And so what happens when you do that is you gain trust and all the kind of immeasurable variables become more robust. And you can't, again, we're as humans, we're taxonomous. We have to have a label. We like, things in order. And I understand that some of these things are hard to measure. However, uh, the best thing you can do as a leader is display the traits you want to see in the people that you're affecting, right? And so sometimes you have to trust more than you maybe know how, but again, that's what you're asking them to do. So when you can do it together, it's way more gratifying, and you're getting better, and also they're getting better. And maybe the way that you design and the way that you feel comfortable with it isn't the way. It might not be the way that works for this person. And so you trust them. And that's one thing that, Eddie's always said. He's like, well, they have a good meet or something. He's like, what does that mean, Ed? And he's like, well, that means they trust him. And that's pretty powerful. And so I think that autonomy and questioning and kind of leading in that regard gets you there in a way that makes you better, makes them better, and it also it may be more challenging. And I'm not saying you're not going to come home and be frustrated, but I think in those moments of frustration, uh, you're contemplating on how to do better, and it pushes you. Versus like it's very much like a Dead Poet Society style, I guess, um, where if you want kids to come in and sit in their chair and not move, and you lecture them and hope that they learn something, versus getting them engaged, and kind of taking a different approach to um, getting people, including yourself, to reach your potential. And you may not know what that is in that moment, but it's way better to try.
And I think that so many, and I mean, Kirk and I both kind of come from, yes, we're coaches, but we're also educators. I think that there's a big push in education in general that, the slogan that my school district uses is, we don't want teachers to be afraid to burn the toast. We want teachers to be willing to innovate. And there's never going to be a, buyer's remorse in what you do. And I think that, we as coaches, we want to try to influence our kids to know that whether they succeed or fail in a set, in a meet, in a season, I mean, the only thing that comes out of it is a learning outcome. And the ability for kids to be able to, handle adversity and handle failure and learn from it is huge. And that's what we want to do. And I think that what you're talking about is just another way that we can, influence kids to learn in a way that is non-threatening for them and makes them feel like, they have a lot of choice and a lot of say in the matter.
For sure.
And that's, it's so hard to do as a coach. And I I work around teachers that love to be in control. And this COVID pandemic has thrown control to the wind. And we talked a little bit about how, control is an illusion anyway. What did you mean when you said that control is an illusion in coaching?
I think that in coaching, it's an illusion in the context of there's a billion variables in a human's life, a billion. And we think that the one variable of uh, you know 3100s, or what you're doing for training in that hour of the 24-hour day is the variable. And to me, it's easy to get caught up in a variable because you can contextualize a variable. However, uh, when you step back and look at it, and you kind of look around, and kind of being in the mountains and just getting outside and kind of immersing yourself in something that's bigger than you kind of realize that we're all at the mercy of whatever this big rock that we're living on is going to give us. Like, and so you can either tune into that, and realize that tomorrow you may wake up and you don't know what's going to happen, and nothing is guaranteed in that context. And so uh, it's kind of about the journey. It's about COVID happens, and it's like, well, you didn't get your championship meet, and that is it's a bummer, and I understand what you've given, but I hope you're a good teammate. I hope you encourage somebody every day. I hope that you did your best every day, because that's all you got now. I mean, and I guess that's the only thing you're really guaranteed. You're only guaranteed to wake up and basically say, how do I get better today? And it doesn't mean how do I swim faster. It means, what do I want to learn that I've never learned before today? What do I want to tune into that I've never tuned into before today? And I think once you start training that mindset, uh, I guarantee you'll start thinking thoughts you've never thought before. And I think that's one of the most awesome things in life. Like, if you wake up every day and try to think the same things, what are you doing? Like, I think Bob Dylan said it best. He's not busy being born, is busy dying. And so I think that we get so fixated on such minutia and small details as coaches. Sometimes we forget to step back and look at the forest and look at the big picture. And the big picture is, you're affecting somebody's life, but you're also trying to get them to take control and take ownership of who they are and what they want to do and how they want to do it. And whatever they want to do, let's say they want to be, I want to, coach, I want to play rock and roll. I want to move to Nashville. Well, how can I help you, John? I want to get you there. Uh, and
And I
so,
think that, Kirk, you said this before, your willingness as a coach to, extend that bridge to your athlete on a non-swimming basis makes them a better performer for you, for their teammates, for your program. You're getting more out of them by doing nothing more than connecting.
and it
And
just
that's
opens
huge.
so much up for you and them, because it's like, well, I don't know anything about playing guitar. What can you teach me? you know,
And
and then it's
you're
like,
never a better student than when you become a teacher, right? So I mean,
for sure,
that's
for sure.
powerful.
And then in terms of just some of my research and how do you package feedback? Well, okay. Well, so John likes to play guitar, and so on a set, and if he's coming over the top with his freestyle with a certain pattern that is less efficient than you think it could be, well, how do I communicate that the most effective? Well, I'm going to speak music, or the little music I know, or I'm going to go home and the next day I wake up, I'm going to try to watch something about guitar and learn a little bit about that. So I go back to John and say, "Hey, John, I was learning, this chord or how to play, or uh, and then you can relate swimming feedback in a language that kind of, expedites the process, because it's not talking in the language that it's talking in a language that John knows. So then he gets, oh yeah, I got that, and so that diversification as a coach, I think, is essential. And I get that, everybody's got time constraints, and no doubt, but I mean, in the world we live in, it doesn't have to be long. It can be 5 minutes. Like, look up, like a little video or whatever it is. But there's a really good series on Netflix now about Garth Brooks and his story. And I didn't know anything about Garth Brooks, but he's like a kid from Oklahoma, grew up with pretty stern parents, and you know he I think he was the youngest of maybe 3 or 4 kids, and he just decided that he wanted to, sing country music, and he just didn't give it up, and he came from not nothing. I think they had a family farm, but he he went to Nashville and made it, and
Yeah.
I think that sort of belief is huge, and he just trusted himself, and I know that's just like one success story, and there's about a billion of those out there, but I think encouraging kids to trust themselves is the most important thing that we can impart to young people, or to people in general. And I think that starts with uh, putting yourself out there.
And I kind of cut you off on purpose because I wanted people to kind of understand, you know, you have certain beliefs about choice and you doing you and making decisions that you truly believe in. Kirk, you kind of had a different path than most D1 Power 5 assistant coaches beyond your initial two positions. What are you doing now, and how did you kind of make that decision to go there?
So yeah, we moved to Denver last year. It's about a year now, and I think I came here for a conference maybe 10 year or maybe 5 years ago. It was a while ago. It was a ACSM conference when I was at the Councilman Center, and I just fell in love with the mountains. Like, it was just, and I just fell in love with the freedom of the West. I guess, like, I can get in my car and drive wherever I want to go as long as I have a tent. I'm free to go there. And that's awesome to me. It doesn't cost much money, and so that freedom, just, I don't know. I just it just felt, I don't know if it's like, I wouldn't call myself a cowboy in any sense of that word, but just the freedom of that, that kind of lifestyle, and just kind of exposing yourself to the elements, and just appreciating things like, we were joking because we went camping this weekend in the mountains, and we got back, we're like, we get to sleep in a bed, and I think just that reminder of, we got it pretty good. You can sleep in your bed, that some people don't get that opportunity. Uh, and so when you kind of take everything away and you kind of realize what you got, that's pretty cool. And so I'm working at swim labs now, prior to COVID, I was substitute teaching, and Jason and I were talking a little bit about this prior. You want to talk about good coaches, great coaches. Some of the teachers that I was able to work with, in just the small period of time, I was so impressed. Uh, just the most passionate people I've ever met, and it's not an easy job by any stretch of that word. But they're just teachers that don't give up, looking for any way to reach kids. Um, and so I learned a tremendous amount in just the small amount of time that I was able to kind of, basically live a life and live a day in their life, and so that was really kind of an interesting perspective. And so I'd go from there and go to swim labs, and swim labs has been really cool because it's stretching my boundaries in terms of, well, I'll have an elite triathlete, and then I'll have a 9 and 10 year old, good little age grouper, and then I'll have a 70-year-old um, uh, guy who just likes to come and learn about swimming, and he swims on his own and just wants to get better. And so you get to meet a lot of different people, but you're also trying to communicate the same thing, but in a different way to each person you get to talk to. And so that was awesome. Uh, has it been easy being out here? Do I have, the luxury of having a university job and, all that stuff? No. Um, but at the same time, I think it's been good for me in terms of just evaluating who I am and what I'm about. And every time I get in my car and I'm driving somewhere and I see the mountains, it's always worth it. And I give kudos to the team at IU, like being around such a culture where you see these kids uh, giving up everything to pursue their dream. And and Jason and I talk about this, like, as good as Lily King is, and I don't bet on her to lose by any means, so don't get me wrong, Lily. You still got to go to trials and make the team, and you see these kids pursuing their dream, giving up luxuries that we all are kind of trained and programmed to pursue in life. Um, but again, coming back to, kind of control is sort of an illusion. It's like it makes you feel comfortable, it makes you feel secure, but the reality is, you know, you're not really secure, and so you might as well do exactly what you want to do. You might have to struggle for it a little bit, but um, you're always going to be more grateful. You're always going to be more kind of in tune with uh, the little things. I think when you're doing like what you want, and no better picture of that than these kids that wake up and I mean, I'm not saying their life is difficult, but I guess what I'm saying is their life is not guaranteed. Like a Blake Peroni, like he make the Olympic team in 2016, but 2020 is a whole different game. you know.
And we talked about life's not a guarantee. I think a lot of athletes are, struggling around the country with, the Olympic trials being in 2020 was a guarantee in their mind. And how do they now take that realization, pivot, redirect? I mean, we could see incredible things happen next year. I mean, knock on wood that trials happens, but we could see incredible things happen where athletes that embrace that change and embrace that feeling of uncertainty and know that they can, their opportunity wasn't lost. I mean, we could see incredible things happen in the next year. What could a Carson Foster do in the next year? What could,
Exactly.
some of those age groupers that we see their names every now and then, but now is their unfulfilled opportunity this summer could lead to greater things next summer. So you talked a little bit about Lily, and if you have never heard Lily's, I call it the Lily Uncaged story, where she talks about being in the ready room at the Olympics in 2016 with the finger wag drama, and how she followed it up in Budapest and Kazan. And I mean, Lily describes herself as becoming a whole new person when she's in the ready room. And I think about a lot of different, coaches and psychologists and professionals have different names for this. Some people call it a flow state, or other people call it being in the zone. For you as a psychophysiologist, what do you attribute that to? How can we as coaches help to unlock that potential in our athletes?
I think we've touched on this a little bit already. I think the the most unique thing about Lily is she is Lily uh, squared, and she trusts Lily, and I'm not saying that it's just that she works her butt off, 100%. She gives it everything every day. Um, but I asked her one time, I was like, "What do you think about when you're behind the block?" Like, and in the classic Lily form, and it just spoke to me too. It's like she said, "Well, I think I'm gonna win. I'm gonna get my hand on the wall before everybody else." And I was like, "Wow, that you just." She kind of keeps it simple, and she decides it, right? Like you just decide, this is what I'm going to do, and I am not going to accept anything else. And you'd be surprised how many people struggle with doing those things, right? Like it's very difficult to say this is what I'm going to do, and I'm going to give everything to do that. And but from a psychophysiology perspective, what that allows when you completely do that and decide, and you give yourself kind of no other option, um, you start to kind of harness this belief. And when you harness it a little bit, it frees up the physiology. There's not this constraint of the doubt. The doubt is the worst thing you can have as an athlete. I'm not saying that reflection is different than doubt. I think you can reflect on things, you can ruminate a little bit, but the best athletes that I've ever been around, they have this ability to spend some time reflecting, ruminating, and then they dump it and they're moving forward. They don't attach affective valence. They see the information. They don't take it personal, and if they do, they use it as fuel. You've seen the Michael Jordan. They know how to drink it in and then put it back out. They don't like wallow in their sorrow about coach said this. They're just like, nah, coach said this. Okay, we'll see. you know, uh,
I think
and so
you mentioned the Michael Jordan series. Like the 30 for 30s they've put out the last couple of weeks, I've seen, and it directly relates to what we're talking about. The Michael Jordan 30 for 31 is, how what he did as an athlete mentally and how it made him tick. And then there was the Lance Armstrong one, which was what he did incorrectly that gave him an edge. And then there was the Bruce Lee one, which is how he thought and reflected and focused that made him elite. And then it was the Mark McGuire, Sammy Sosa one, which was what they did illegally to make them elite. So, we as coaches want the best for our athletes, and we definitely want to encourage the elite side mentally without making such a big deal that athletes feel the need to do things that they shouldn't and dope and go beyond the realm of our sport just to go a fast time in 100 free.
for sure, and I think that you have to give, again, stepping back and looking at the big picture, like, and I think, it's Lance was a childhood hero, which is always so sad. But I mean, I watched that too, and it's you can't not be fascinated with his mindset. Like just, I mean, can you imagine? We're talking about Lily deciding that she was going to do something. Can you imagine being on a cancer bed and deciding that you are not going to die? Like that decision, so it's probably hard to turn off for a lot of people,
Yeah, absolutely.
especially at that level, and so I think that sometimes swimming can be counterproductive, just our schedule. Sometimes it promotes a life of imbalance. And so I guess that's kind of what I am trying to give my, it's like, I want to be balanced. And I'm not saying like, uh, it's been easy being out here in terms of just, I'm just trying to, figure things out. And luckily I have a beautiful fiance that has a job and like a good job. And we've had like, I feel blessed to have that. So, but it's really kind of been a how bad do you want it? And I think a lot of kids today, and you see those stories of Bruce Lee or Lance or Michael Jordan. They're not get rich quick schemes. you know,
Yeah.
they struggle a lot. and you can't just assume that because you gave it a year or you gave it a month or, you got to just embrace the journey and that climb. And, we've had the opportunity to climb some mountains out here, some 14ers, and you get up to some altitude, and uh, you all you can think about is how you want to stop and turn around. But I think what elite athletes do the best is they just taking small steps. Just take a small step, and just I'm sure when Michael was cut, or I think what made Michael the best is competitive as hell for sure, but he just took a small step every day. And I guess coming full circle to our previous conversations of like, how do we be better as coaches? Just take a small step every day. It's not going to be easy. You're going to be huffing and puffing, but I guarantee you the view from the top will be 100% worth it. And the top is not winning an NCAA title. That's not the top. The top is uh, whatever it is for you. And I think that that's the key to figuring out for yourself. And I think that today, as a cohort of coaches, and then just as an athletic standpoint, we've got to critically think and ask ourselves why we feel the way we do, why we're attached to certain training modalities, what ways can we get better. I mean, just sit down and or go for a walk and just tune out of all the we're bombarded by information, and it's at our fingertips. And at no point in the history of the human brain have we had this, right? We're not, the brain is not set up for the information highway. We're kind of, the brain in the human is more like a wagon and a horse optimization standpoint, right? And so you have to be careful. And I'm not saying like I'm not against information. I think information is truly important, but I think you have to ask yourself what you think about it and maybe why you think that way about it, and then just kind of follow that path and uh, see how you feel at the other end.
Awesome. Kirk, you are one of the smartest people that I've ever met. And that statement has been corroborated by a lot of people who are also smarter than me. So, in your perspective, kind of seeing the sport, growing up being on the fringe, like you talked about, and seeing it at the highest level and at the lowest level, and, in some weird miscellaneous levels. Are there any aspects of training that you feel coaches put too much emphasis on? You talked about being attached to certain training modalities. Are there any things that you think we're too attached to? And do you think there are things that deserve more attention that we should add to our tool belts?
I think that and so this is not, it's not a bad thing. It's like, and by the way, I don't think I'm smart. I just think I love learning. I,
There's
I think
something to
that,
say though, that is a far more critical skill than actually being smart, because it'll lead to
yeah,
being smart. But
well, you have to submerge your ego sometimes, and that's hard I mean, but I get it. But so I think like, I have to say it like this. It's like if you love pasta, for example, you want to cook pasta all the time, but reality is you're probably going to get sick of pasta. And so in terms of training, like you have things that you love, but when you learn to cook new things and try new things and get away from the things that you love, it doesn't mean you have to not cook pasta, but maybe you can cook pasta with uh, some hoisin sauce, or you can just switch it up. So it doesn't have to be the way that you think it has to be. And I know that trying new foods or trying new things is a struggle sometimes, and I understand that completely. When it's your livelihood and you're trying to do the best you can, I get it. However, I think that one thing that you have to do is you have to change the stimulus. Just like you don't want to eat pasta every night, the kids don't want to do that same set every. I mean, I think similar sets every week are important. I think that having a way to measure where your kids are at on that particular day um, is important. But I think that it has to be a collective data set. I think doing one test set every Monday, what does that truly tell you? because that may tell you that, oh well, John had a test today and John's fatigued, so he did poorly. I mean, but we may read that as, oh, the training's, we got to go higher, lower, so you just have to tune into your kids more so than look at test results. But I am a firm believer in, you have to challenge them, and you have to put something on the board that they may not be ready for, or they're a little bit skeptical of, or even you think is crazy sometimes. Now, I'm not saying no, don't be safe, be smart, but I think that the sets that I love is kind of like a little bit of stimulus overload. And I'm not saying physical stimulus, but get them out of their comfort zones. Like, get them on deck, like, do mix it up, make it a little bit chaotic. Because when it's chaos, sometimes you truly get to learn what people are and who they are. And you get to see how they respond in those moments. And so when you got a lot going on, like Dr. Steger, we did this set, not and I learned so much about, I guess, what we would call gamification from him. I was kind of like a young coach, like, we got to do 8 100s and it's got to be this. And he was like, what if we hung donuts from that center backstroke line? And then they had to take a bite of a donut. Yeah. And
That
so, like,
that is a 2-second obstacle that
for
is
sure.
going to create engagement.
And you see how they handle it. Like, some people, they don't take a bite. Some people, they'll give everything for the donut, right? And so you just see, and like, we had a drop the hammer board where it's like a record board, and the guys team loved it. Girls could care less. But if you brought brownies or something at the end of practice for the women's team, they're like, they'll give. So it's just, you have to the more you can expose yourself and your athletes or your team to, the more you get to see what they are, what they're capable of. And I think that's the cool part of training. And so I'm not going to sit here and say that one particular way is best. I think it's a potpourri. Like, I think if you can kind of have some staples that they expect, because I think expectation, they're always going to get better. You have to do it again. Like, you do one set 1 week, uh, they're always going to perform better the next week, mostly, right? Because of familiarity, like, they know a little bit more about it. But also, you need those ones where it's like from left field. Like,
Yep.
we're
We
gonna
had
have
a
Thai food tonight.
we had a we had a speaker come to our school district a few years ago, and his name's Don Wettrick. He's a STEAM educator based out of Indianapolis, just outside of Indianapolis. And he talked about when he told his parents he was going to become a teacher. And his father said, I will encourage you to be a teacher. He was a lifelong educator himself. He said, my one bit of advice for you is, if you're going to spend 20 years teaching, don't spend 20 years teaching the same year over and over again. And,
For
you talk
sure.
a lot about, mixing it up. And we talked a little bit off camera about a big part of kids experiencing success. And this is my personal belief, and I'm sure a lot of coaches who are, truists to old school training, or, are the USRPT new age of coaching, they might disagree. But, I'm a firm believer that any athlete can experience success to the greatest level, so long as they wholeheartedly believe in that unique process, whether it's high volume, low volume, USRPT, technique emphasis. And it sounds like you have discovered this in a far more in-depth capacity from your studies and your advanced degrees than, my just, you know, noticing things on a pool deck. So can you speak anything about that real quick?
Yeah, I think that. I mean, I think coaches, we're. I hate saying it. We're scientists. We're chefs. We wear a lot of hats. But the biggest thing you can do is just observe and collect information, and use that information. I'm not saying that you don't have to work hard. You have to work hard as a swimmer, and you have to work smart. But um, the harder you work, like the usually what happens is the better you're gonna feel about what you're doing. Like, I mean, it's like, it's kind of like I said, when you're climbing the mountain, and it kind of, you're on dire straits. But when you every swimmer has had an opportunity to get out of the pool when they did something they didn't think they could do, and they always feel like on cloud nine, and they're like, wow, like. And when they get to those moments, that's what's special. And so, yeah, I think that believing in whatever you're doing is crucial for sure. Uh, However, I do think that there's something to be said for getting in the uh, getting in shape to train to race. You know, there's training and then there's racing. And I think that how you do that, I mean, we researched high intensity interval training, which actually peaks the VO2 faster than just swimming or just doing, long runs. And so I think that that's like a hugely important. But sometimes I think that we are in a world of instant gratification. But one thing I learned from racing was that, when you show up to a track, you just got to do some laps and you just got to feel the track out. And I think sometimes when you give, you know, everybody hates these kind of sets. Like, but if you go 3/800s pull or something along those lines, uh, it gives them some time and to just, you're going to have your ones that get out and go to the bathroom and all that stuff, but that's okay. But it just gives them the time to just kind of figure things out for them. And I know it might not be perfect for them, and I'm not saying that I'm a proponent of that style. However, there is a aspect of it that is outside of physiology, um, that allows them to feel their race car, and feel what works best. And you can give them some cues as you as a coach, like, hey, think about this every turn or whatever it is, and then you ask them for feedback. What'd you think about? And you'd be surprised what you get. And so I think that that is important. I think that sometimes we hover over the top too much. I think that um, you have to give them some freedom. You have to give them some space. And I think sometimes a longer set is just what the body needs. And sometimes in the morning, like before they go to school and they're already kind of stressed out about whatever they got that day, sometimes it helps them perform at school. you know, when you're not over the top, in there, or they get some time to just uh, kind of decompress, and you're not really challenging, but you're still getting that aerobic component as a training effect. And so that's a win. And then at night you can come in and do your USRPT or whatever it is, but don't be afraid uh, of like a 3/800 set or like, stuff like that. It's okay. And don't be afraid of uh, doing 125s. You'd be surprised what you can get out of kids in 10 rounds of 10 25s. you know,
I mean,
amazed. They're gassed, And so one of the guys, like Dave Tanner, who was a legendary coach um, in Bloomington North, he was an expert at uh, taking high school kids that didn't swim all year round, did high intensity interval training, connected with the kids, used the power rack, and they were always tough. They always were really good sprints in the high school. The high school lineup of nothing. You have the 500, but I mean, obviously, when you get into the college ranks, it's a little bit. You have 200s a stroke, and so it's a little bit different. Different table, I should say. Like you can't bring the same training modalities to the college table as you can use at the high school level. But he perfected it. But he would still give them time. Just let them play.
yep.
Sometimes just get the lane lines out of the pool and watch what they do. And that's a famous doc story, that the one that I love. Like, he pretended that he got mad one day, and then he snuck around the back of the bleachers, and he like basically took data on what his team's going to do now. Watch
Wow.
who leaves, see what happens. And those are the kinds of moments, I guess, where it's maybe not like chaos or anything like that, but you just truly learn a lot. When you kind of give, and comes back to autonomy. Like, what are they going to do when they're left up to their own devices? you know, and that's scary as heck. I get it, but sometimes it's so revealing, and then it gives you a platform to move forward with. And now who's going to be behind and who's going to be in front and who's going to be in the middle. Because sometimes the kids in the middle, they work the hardest. They don't really ask questions. They come in, they bust their butt, but they're not getting the attention that some of the worst performers versus the best, so how do you work the middle, and one
That
thing
is
that Eddie
something,
is,
I mean,
go
especially
ahead.
for me and my assistant coach, like, we are so focused on getting our new and, really novice swimmers up to speed. And I'm so focused on, our point scorers and trying to make sure that I am doing the most for them. And though, I mean, so lanes 1 and 2 are getting it and lanes 7, 8 are getting it. But that lane 3 through 5, that's a place, an area that I as a coach need to grow for
It's
sure.
hard, and I think, like, if you go, it's so funny, like when you go watch Eddie at practice, um, he writes the set, and a lot of coaches that you're standing there with are like writing the set down, and as they're writing the set down, Eddie's walking on the bulkhead and touching each swimmer on their cap and saying something in a low tone to each person. It takes 5 minutes, walks down, and then he gives a set and comes around, and like by the time the people that you're standing with get the set down, they missed all of it. They missed the important part, in my opinion.
Yep.
And it's like, that's what is cool. And sometimes, like, we would do red set at Indiana every Tuesday, and it's a hard set. Everybody, I won't say they don't like it. I think they feel good afterwards, but they come in with some they're I won't say that they're afraid, but they're
It's tense. I mean, I've been on deck on red
yeah,
day, and I
yeah,
mean, as the pool is getting flipped, like there is a cloud
yeah.
over the pool, and you're right. It's interesting to see how
They
each
just
one of
know they're
them.
gonna work,
Some of them
and
are
you see
staring
what
at the
they do.
paper, yeah, and some of them are just like, doesn't matter what the set is, we're just gonna get through it. I get it. Yeah.
Right. And even if it was a cupcake red set, you still get that, response, and you get to see it. But, I always got to run Lily, Annie, and you get to see their lanes, and you get to see how each of them respond to some severe stress. And it's so cool. And my whole goal, that whole set, was I'm going to make them smile. I'm going to try my hardest to make them smile. I don't care if they think I'm annoying, but I'm going to make Annie and Lily and whoever is in this lane, they're going to smile today. And they would come in and they would be red faced and they don't want to hear what I have to say. But if that's how I judge my success on those days, right? Like, and so I think that if you can do that, you're going to have way more fun. They're going to have maybe more fun. They might be annoyed with you, but who cares? that's what sometimes that's what they're supposed to be.
Kirk, my favorite memory from IU swim camp, and I've got the video. I mean, I'm videoing from upstairs, and you had made a deal with the group. I think it was Wednesday afternoon when Ray and Mike were both off, and you'd made a deal that if they could hook a snorkel on the far flags, that they would get off of, and I'll put the video in here on the YouTube video. They could get off of practice if they hooked the snorkel on the far flags. And Brock Brown throws the snorkel and hooks it, and it falls. And I mean, you did what all coaches would do, like, oh, you didn't do it, get in the water. But like from that moment on, none of those guys wanted to be there that day. But that moment is something that sticks out to them and will forever. And you got more out of them because you made them smile, even
In a
though you
lot of ways,
made them swim the full practice. I mean, it was, I can't
and
believe I got it on
sometimes
video.
it's just like one of those. It's not if you and I loved and like so the gamification. Like I love that. And I guess I kind of learned it from Dr. Sager and then learned more about it, just getting my PhD and stuff. But it's not that hard. Like those Wednesday night sets. Like it's like Wednesday in the summer. We're the only group there. And it was like, well, okay, well, we did like a circus. Like you get tickets. I bought like went to Dollar General and got like admit one tickets, and you can make it whatever you want it. You can play blackjack. It's just, again, like it's way more fun for me. And if it's more fun for me, it's probably going to be more fun for
It's
them.
probably going to be more fun for them. That's right. So you've talked a little bit about gamification. I know that you're trying to name drop for me. That's kind of my big kick right now. Eventually, I'm going to get my ducks in a row and be able to do some sort of podcast specifically about it. But that's kind of my side hustle right now. But like you said, it's just a way that we can, as coaches, have fun, get kids to have fun. And for me personally, I'm on this kick right now because I don't know what kids are going to look like when they come back from COVID. For my kids specifically, we don't have a club program nearby, so
Right.
the vast majority of my kids have been out of the water. So my last question that I ask on the podcast is always, what advice do you have for swimmers and coaches as we recover from this global pandemic? The gamification thing is just kind of I'm hoping it's my gimmick that I can get kids excited to be back. But what advice would you give blanket advice to coaches and athletes on, what's it going to look like? How can we recover?
I think just don't go back to the coach you were. Be the coach that, they need right now, and be the person that you want to, do what you want to do. But if you have this idea of going back to what you were, I don't know if that's good for you or them. I would say you feel it out, talk to them. Like, one thing that we did at Bloomington South that I didn't know at the time because we were just kind of doing it, but we had a talent show, and it was so fun. So maybe kind of change it up the first week, like do some drills and do some training, and but go easy, go be easy on yourself as a coach, and just be easy on them, because they're just as, we're all in the same boat, and so just do it together, I guess, and kind of look for ways to be able to, like we talked about John playing guitar, like that's a real person. His name is Dan Fusen. He's now an independent singer songwriter in Nashville, Tennessee.
That's
But
awesome.
I didn't know he played guitar until we had a talent show, and he came in and played a guitar behind his back. So
Behind his back.
behind his back, and I was like, holy cow, and so, and a lot of times, like, what happens on a team is you get settled in as like, oh, that's Dan, he's a 100 flat. Well, now Dan is a awesome shredding guitarist, and people on the team see him differently. And so I guess go back and try to see the same kids that you've had differently. Maybe they'll see you differently as well.
That's awesome. Kirk, thank you so much. I mean, we've been on the phone now for almost 2 hours, and it's been a great talk. And I appreciate everything you're doing for our community of coaches, and just trying to make sure that everyone is focused on learning and improving, whether that's one thing at a time, 1% better, however you want to call it. That's something that I've always admired from you, and your desire to just make kids and coaches better. So I really appreciate you coming on today, and we'll talk to you soon.
I feel the same way about you. Thanks so much, man.
Absolutely, Kirk. Thanks.